Well, by the way, we finished chapter 6 last week. Many of you were hoping we would get out of chapter 6. You were feeling a little pummeled in chapter 6. We're moving on to chapter 7. But the reason why we are in the book of Luke comes from Luke chapter 1, verse 4. And it says that you may have certainty concerning the things that you have been taught. And our desire from this stage is that you have certainty in God's word. And it can be this thing that you can rely on honestly for the things that you face in life. Let me just say this to you. I want to give you context. I haven't discussed this in quite a while. Luke is our Greek author writing to a Greek audience with a Greek context. And it's one of the reasons why when you read the book of Luke, you're getting a little bit of a different feel than you would out of course, Matthew or Mark or John. And again, having an audience that's looking to the Greek mindset and the Greek understanding of things, there's some things that he, of course, is going to underline that you may not see in one of the other books. And so that's kind of been interesting. So when we went through chapter 6, you can see he's speaking to those who would be Gentiles and saying, even though this message was for these disciples who follow Jesus, it's for us as well. So let's jump into chapter 7, verse 1. Here we go. After he finished all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. So what you have is that this group listened to Jesus speak these things that he spoke to his disciples. Some who are going to follow him into Capernaum are his disciples, and some are just this crowd that is following him. And you need to understand, there's a little bit of rock star thing that's starting to happen with Jesus at this point. I mean, he's doing some amazing things. You kind of want to be around for some amazing things. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen next, right? I mean, he's doing some pretty, really fantastical things. And so there's this group that goes with him into Capernaum. Capernaum is a beautiful little city. I would say for those who went to Israel, it was one of our favorite cities by far. It just was an amazing place to be in. And it's kind of his home base. We know from beginning in Luke, he kind of left Nazareth and kind of never went back. And Capernaum kind of becomes the place that he hangs out in. And so he's going back into Capernaum. And so he's just going to be in that village. And this is what takes place. Now, a centurion had a servant who was sick at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. And so the next person that comes along is the centurion. The centurion is the centurion that is responsible for this region, and he has made his base in Capernaum. Okay? And so he would have been this official who obviously has people underneath him, and his job, keep the peace, make sure the taxes keep rolling in, all the things that a centurion is supposed to be. You need to understand, the empire is expansive at this time. And so basically you just set up these places that obviously are meant to kind of keep everything being the peace. But what's interesting is that this guy is different, and we'll get there. Here we go. When the centurion heard about Jesus, it's very important. The centurion has heard about Jesus. In our time in Luke, we have heard in Capernaum that Jesus has cast out a demon, that he has healed Peter's mother-in-law. There's other things that have happened. He has healed a paralytic man, happened in Capernaum. And so this guy who is watching this hears of Jesus, and he has a need. It is his servant who he cares for who is sick. And he sent him to, and he sent to him elders of the Jews asking him to come and heal his servant. By the way, I don't believe that the centurion asked Jesus to come, which I will show you that later. I think the Jews asked for Jesus to come. We'll get to that in just a second. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, "He is worthy to have you do this for him." Now, I told you last week that there was a really interesting concept that Jesus said, listen, you got to make up your minds. Either I am a good tree that bears good fruit, or I'm a bad tree that bears bad fruit, but you cannot mix the two. Because notice that these Jewish elders say, we want you to do good fruit. Does that make sense? We want you to heal his servant. We want you to take care of this. But they would call him a bad tree. Right? And so there's this conflict where you have him going, look, we need you. We need you to do this. He is worthy. Why is he worthy? Here we go. For he loves our nation. And he is the one who built us our synagogue. He loves our nation. This centurion, being around this Jewish people all these years, has come to care for Israel, come to care for these people. And honestly, as a centurion, he would have had vast wealth, and his care for them, he built their synagogue, their house of worship. He funded it. I mean, just philanthropy. He just kind of, just out of the goodness of his heart, goes, I care for you, care for your nation. You need a good synagogue, and he paid for it. I want to show you some pictures. I showed you this earlier. We were in chapter 4, but I want to show you these again. This is the synagogue that we walked up to in Capernaum. This is the outer wall where you walk up, and you can see some of the doorways that you would walk in to get into this synagogue. This is, again, where they would come together, and you would have rabbis who would teach. And I showed you this picture as well. One of the things we learned in our trip to Israel is everything has been built and destroyed multiple times. I mean, they build it, someone destroys it, builds it, someone destroys it. So at this excavation, they actually dug down, and those black rocks or darker rocks would have been the foundation in the time of Jesus. That would have been what that centurion paid for to be the foundation for what would have been the synagogue in which Jesus was in. And so we're standing right by that corner piece, and this is the look into the synagogue. It would have had a roof, it would have had more walls, but this is where you would have come. And so he built them this house of worship. So by the way, we were overwhelmed, honestly. We were like, not only are we standing in a place where Jesus stood, but when we was told to us, we know who built this synagogue. It was the centurion that Jesus has this interaction with. There were all these connection points for us. And here's our little ragtag group as we are sitting here taking our notes and doing all these other fun things. But it was interesting. And so they had me teach in the synagogue. So they're like, Jeff, you preach where Jesus preached. Woohoo! All right. That's on a video somewhere that I'm sure will never see the light of day, but at least I did it. My favorite part was Christine, who sat there looking like she really cared what I was saying. Anyway, but the idea is that it was just kind of this really cool thing to be in this place. But notice what the Jews are saying. He is worthy. He loves our nation. He built us our synagogue. Jesus responds. And Jesus went with them. Here's where it gets interesting. And Jesus went with them. And when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends. Originally he sent these Jewish elders. Now he sends friends, saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Now you need to understand, Jewish law for a rabbi, for a teacher, to go into a Gentile's house would have made him unclean. For a rabbi to interact with Gentiles specifically who had been around other people would make him unclean. This Gentile not only understands Jewish customs and Jewish law, but wants to be respectful of Jesus. So I believe the Jews said, hey, come and heal his servant. And then as the guy starts, and as this guy sees Jesus walking to his house, tells his friends, go tell him, I'm not worried to have him in my house. I'm not worried even to have him come in. But what he says next is literally amazing. Therefore, I do not presume to come to you, but say the word. Say the word, and let my servant be healed. Say the word. So this guy, who's a centurion, who's not even a Jew, who has heard of Jesus, goes, look, I'm not worthy to have you come into my house, and I'm not going to come to you because I don't want to make you unclean. But guess what? I know the power you have. Say the word, and my servant will be healed. And as soon as I hear this, speak this word, say this word, I go back to creation where God spoke the heavens and the earth into being. Spoke the oceans and the rivers and the mountains into being. And this centurion gets this and says, Jesus, by the way, John 1, everything that has been made was made through him and by him. You speak it, you don't have to come into my house. You don't need to be near him. And I love this. For I too am a man set under authority with soldiers under me. I say to one, go, and he goes. And to another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it. He goes, listen, I understand authority. I have men that if I tell them to walk off the edge of a cliff, they will walk off the edge of a cliff. Because I have authority. And if you speak the way I speak, things that you speak about will listen to you. And watch this. And when Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him. And turning to the crowd that followed him, said, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. Now, I want to illustrate to you this way. There's a reality in my home. Jody believes that, honestly, that I really don't even have the ability to go anywhere than the middle place of where I'm at. Does that make sense? I don't get really excited. I don't get really depressed. I'm just kind of here. Does that make sense? And it drives Jody nuts because she'll come home and I think I'm like being really excited. And she's like, you're not even excited. I'm like, no, I am. I'm really excited. She goes, you're not even excited. Like nothing, she doesn't feel like nothing excites me. Does that make sense? So I am just a killjoy no matter what. Does that make sense? I don't go low and I don't go high. I'm just like, yeah, and I've tried. And she goes, you're faking it. I'm like, I can't win. I can't win. And believe me, it's been a big deal because she's waiting for the, and I'm like, oh, that's great. And it is, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, and I had this thought. If there is anyone who has seen it all, it has to be Jesus. Does that make sense? I mean, really, what would it take to surprise Jesus? Honestly, he's kind of God, right? So if he's God, what does it take to surprise him? And yet, look at this. It says, when Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him with surprise, better than me. Turning to the crowd, said, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. Let me tell you what I know. I don't think your attendance on Sunday morning, Jesus is all that marveled by it. I don't even think if you dig into your purse or your wallet and give, whoa, wow, that was big. I don't even think when we serve somebody, it seems to me throughout Scripture, the times that you get Jesus excited is when someone acts in faith. When someone acts in faith, Jesus responds. Example, the woman who had the issue of blood reaches into the ground, grabs the hem of his garment. Jesus goes, who touched me? They're like, everybody touched you. He goes, no, somebody touched me in faith. And turns to this woman and goes, woman, your faith made you well. There's a lady who wasn't a Jew who wanted her child to be healed. And comes to Jesus. Jesus goes, look, you're not a Jew. Who are you? She goes, even dogs eat scraps off the tables of their masters. Just give me a scrap. And Jesus goes, there's faith. It seems to be that with Jesus, that what really honestly excites him is when we reach into a place that we go, we need him, and we see him. And by the way, we know that if he speaks it, it just happens. He just gets it. There just seems to be something where Jesus is going, listen, you want to get to me? You can give as much money as anyone's ever given. Great. Is it an act of faith? Is it a place where you needed to rely upon me? Is it a place that you needed to have God do in you what you know should not be able to be done? Because it seems to me from this passage that Jesus, who has probably seen it all, this guy surprised him. This guy surprised him. Because, no, you don't need to come to my house. Just speak it. Just say it. And it'll happen. And Jesus goes, that's faith. Because there doesn't need to be some dance move or some hand signals laying on. Jesus just speaks it. And if there's something I could give to you from today's message, it would be this. Marvel Jesus this week. And the way you marvel Jesus this week is step out in faith. Do something that takes him to fulfill it. See, it wasn't enough just to go ask him to come. It wasn't just enough that his friends went or that the Jews spoke on his behalf. It's that he knew that if Jesus would just say, your servant is healed, it was done. Marvel him this week. Marvel him. Talk about Zhenya and this thing that's going on with this Movember thing. Jody and I have just been blown away. They have put themselves in a place where they need God to come through again and again and again. And guess what? He does. He does. And can I just tell you that the people who are watching, the people on the outside who are looking into your life, that speaks to them. That you stepped out in a way they go, why would you do that? Because this is what my God would ask of me. And then when God comes through, they go, I didn't see that coming. And maybe inside you're like, yeah, but you're like, yeah, he just does that all the time. But inside you're freaking out. But God does want to do that all the time. This young man is close to death. The centurion sends for Jesus. Says, I don't need you to come to my house, just speak it. And can I just say this? I think it made Jesus' day. That's what he's looking for. It's not all the things that we think he may want. He wants us acting in faith. And then when we're done, we give him the glory. Now let me tell you one of the most anticlimactic verses in the Bible. Here it comes. And those who had been sent returned to the house, and they found the servant well. Well, no duh. Right? Seriously, like it has to be in there because we just couldn't leave it hanging there. You got to find out. But really, at this moment, when the centurion says, if you just speak it, it's done. Jesus went, it's done. Matter of fact, in one of the other books, it talks about the fact, what time did it happen? He goes, about this time. That's exactly when he said. It was like, right? Well, of course. Because Jesus is faithful. If he spoke it, of course that servant was well. Of course he was. And how do we live a life? I just want to live in such a way that Jesus goes, there you go, Jeff. You marveled me. Because you surprised me with your act of faith. You didn't hold back. You believed me and you said, I trust you with all that I am. It's a powerful moment. Verse 11. Soon afterward, he went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a great crowd went with him. Nain is about 25 miles south of Capernaum on the west bank side. And he's going down there, and it's interesting. He's kind of got this entourage, right, that's following him. And he's going to come along another group. Look what happens. And as he drew near to the gate of the town, behold, a man who had died was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and a considerable crowd from the town was with her. So we got two large crowds coming together. The crowd that's following Jesus into the city, and as they get to the gate, they are seeing this large crowd following this widowed mother who is burying her son. Luke is the only one that gives us this story. I believe that somehow Luke got a hold of the details, talked to the people who were involved, because Luke doesn't give anything that he didn't check and double check. Matthew, Mark, and John don't give us a story. Only Luke does. And I want you to see something that might surprise you. And when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her. And he said to her, do not weep. Now, I want to say something, and this might come off harsh. And I don't mean it to. I just need you to understand context. There really was no need for Jesus to do anything. And I'm not trying to be, again, of course, people die every day. The fact is I don't know how many villages he walked past for someone who died that week or someone who had died, I don't know. But people die every day. And he comes into this village and he sees her. And he had compassion on her. And I don't believe that Jesus came in going, okay, in this city I've got to do something really miraculous. I've got to blow their socks off. I don't believe that was it at all. I believe that Jesus walked in, saw her crying, who was a widow who had just lost her son, and goes, I can, so I will. That's it. I believe he said, I can do something about this, so I will. Because this is what I want you to understand. Our God is a compassionate God. He hurts with you and for you. You touch him. Your story matters. You're just not some sand on the shore. You're not some minion that's just another one he has to deal with or something he has to corral. He knows the hairs on your head. He knows you. And there are times that our story and our journey touches him. And he is capable and able to do whatever he wants to that glorifies his name. And I believe that when he saw her and looked upon her and had compassion upon her, this is about her, not about the son who is dead. I believe that both Lazarus and this young man were like, really? You brought me back? I was on the other side. I made it. I'm good, right? Why are you bringing me back? But this wasn't about the young man. This is about her. And he didn't want her to be alone. And she was a widow. And she was going to bring her son back because he had compassion on her. Listen to me. God cares about you. And you're going, yes, I believe that, Jeff, but how come sometimes he allows someone to die and yet sometimes he heals? And I can't answer that, but I can tell you this. In your struggle and in your pain, there is a God who cries for you, who weeps for you. And he is not insensitive to your pain. And he is not insensitive to your loss. I believe he gets it. I believe that you have Jesus, who, by the way, if all accounts, Joseph passed away when he was a young man. What did he experience in the passing of his father? His earthly father. Jesus didn't stop that from happening. He felt what it was like to lose. He felt what it was like to be mistreated. By the way, if you don't know that, we're going to get to the Christmas story, and I'm going to just tell you right now. Jesus is a bastard child in his own village. And if you know anything about the culture, he was not treated well as a bastard child in his own village. Because even though Joseph hung around, everyone in the village knew that, well, Mary's using the virgin birth story, but we all know. Jesus did not come in and not experience what it was like for us to have loss and pain and hurt. And I think he sees this woman. I really do believe he sees her. She's crying. He gets the story and goes, I can, so I will. Then he came up and touched the bier. This is what they carry him on. It's like a casket. And the bearer stood still. And he said, young man, I say to you, arise. And the dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. Look what it says. Jesus gave him, almost as a gift, to his mother. Now, I know some of you guys have been Christians a long time. I'm telling you right now, if you were in that village and that kid, who, by the way, had been dead for a while, because by the time you get to the point you're taking him to the place to put him in the ground, that's dead. Does that make sense? That's not a little dead. That's dead. Like they've checked a couple of times. And when Jesus walks up and touches it, and this kid sits up and speaks, I don't care how long you've been, you're freaking out. Okay? Some people lost their minds. Because look at the next verse. Fear seized them all. No one's ready for this. It wasn't like Jesus nudged Peter, watch this is going to be cool. It's just, no, I mean, at this moment, I think they're all like, what? Right? He just sat, he sat up. That guy was dead, like dead, right? Dead? Sat up, talked. Okay, so you go through this. Watch this. And they glorified God. I love that verse. Because what happens is at this kid raising from the dead and being given back to his mother, what is their response? They glorify God. Please understand, miracles are only meant to bring glory to God, not to the person. What it says. And they seized them all, and they glorified God, saying, a great prophet has risen among us, and God has visited his people. Now, why does that become significant? You got to go back to my very first message. There have been 400 years of silence, and all of a sudden, dead people are raising from the dead. And people are going, I mean, literally, if you think Jesus had a crowd now, the crowd's only going to get bigger. Right? Because they're going, you've got to be kidding me. And this report about him spread through the whole of Judea and all the surrounding country. I was there. That kid sat up and spoke. And Jesus gave him to his mother. So why am I telling you these two together? Because one's about a young man on the verge of death, and Jesus heals him with just a spoken word. And one is on the other side of death, and Jesus, with a spoken word, tells him to get up and arise. Why am I telling you this? Because we have a God who's still blown away when we are faithful. And we have a God who can still do miracles. And yet, we are in this hard place. So let me tell you an issue that is an issue for the church. We can't answer why God heals one and not another. I wish I knew. I wish I understood. I do believe that when I get to heaven, I will look back and there'll be this incredible story that was written by that. I don't know why my sister passed. I don't have the ability to put all that together. But this is what I know. That he cried with my family when she passed. And he allowed something for his glory. And you have this young man who has his master go on behalf of him and says, if you speak it, he'll be healed. And by the time they get back, he's hanging out. And a young man who gets risen from the dead because Jesus has compassion. So why does that matter? Because, folks, we are going to face in our lives those who we love who are going to be facing disease, or those who we love who will face accidents. And we'll be going, God, and we're going to plead on their behalf, and we're going to beg on their behalf. And the reality is that God allows some and heals others. And yet it's all to his glory. So let's make this personal. There's a friend of InRoads. His name's Kevin Yamaguchi. Kevin has come many times. One of these guys, every time you see him, he smiles all the time. Like, you really think he's up to something, he smiles that much. Just an amazing heart. Kevin is facing leukemia. And it's serious. And they're going after it as hard as they can, and I would love to say that the results would be better, but they haven't been the best. But if Kevin was standing right here, I want you to understand that no matter what, he wants glory to go to God. That's what Kevin wants. Now I want you to understand something. I want to intercede. I want to beg God because I want to see Kevin live a fulfilled life in which he glorifies God in those lives that he touches. But God might have something else that will bring him glory. And guess what? I can't understand it. Does that make sense? But I know I have the right by God to intercede on his behalf and beg for his life because God says that's okay for me to do. But if God says I am going to allow Kevin to pass, then in that process, what will happen is there will be something that comes out of it that brings God glory. And I've got to be okay with I have, listen to me, a good God. I serve a good God. And so I'm praying for a transplant for him. I'm praying that will come and that we will have Kevin and Kevin will touch lives and be with people. That's what I pray for. But it is a difficult thing to say, God, but I also trust you because you're good. But let me tell you what I know. From this passage, God hurts for Kevin and for those who love him. This is not something that is easy. And although he can see why it's going to happen and why it will glorify his name, that doesn't mean he does not hurt with those who hurt for Kevin and are with him and are walking with him through this. Kevin's one of those guys, everyone who visits him, Kevin's probably the strongest one in the room. And God is using that to his glory. Folks, two things I want you to understand. We need to do something this week that is an act of faith that Jesus marvels at. And second of all, never forget that you have a God who cares for your pain and for your hurt and for your struggle, and yet he will do what is good. So this is what I want us to do. We're going to pray for Kevin. As a church, I would ask that you would pray with me for Kevin's healing and restoration. It's absolutely appropriate to do so. And yes, I will pray as a part of that for God's will to be done. And that is the hard part. Because I then have to trust him that he knows better. So I'm going to ask that you pray with me. Here we go. Father, these two young men, one is healed at the request of his master, and one you gave back because of the love you had for his mother. And Father, you do care. And Father, you say we matter. You know the hairs on our head. You say that we are important to you, and Father, Kevin is important to you. And you are fully aware of what Kevin is going through. And I know you're fully capable to restore him. You are fully capable to have this be done, Father, to your glory. But Father, I also trust that, Father, you know better. So yes, on Kevin's behalf, I plead for his healing. I ask that you would restore his body, that you would use doctors, that you would use the resources that are available to bring Kevin to a place of healing. But I trust you enough to give you Kevin and ask that you do what will glorify your name through him, because that's what Kevin's prayer is as well. So Father, thank you that we get to use this time to stand in the gap for this young man. And Father, may you do so to your glory, and may your name be great forever and ever and ever. Through the blood of your Son, Jesus. Amen. As always, we want you to know that some have already gotten up and had communion at any time at InRoads. You may go whenever you feel like your heart is ready. Come up to the bread, dip into the cup, and have your own time. During this last song, we encourage you that if you would like to, you can come up and do the same. A couple things I want you to know. Tim and I will be at the information tent. We would love to talk with you. If you have any questions, I don't care if you've been here all 13 years. If you have a question, come and talk to us. We'd love to connect with you. We would love for you to think about joining one of our in-life groups where we take the Sunday message and go deeper. We would love for you to think about that, and there's information at the kiosk. We'd love to give that to you as well. And then I hope that you will fellowship with those around you and come back next week ready to dig in some more. God bless you guys. Have a great week. And again, next week we come back together and we'll talk about more what God is doing through his word. Thank you.